The sound emerges first, a wet, mechanical clicking beneath cracked ceramite plating. Brother Thaddeus lies motionless in the blast crater, his left pauldron split open like fractured bone, revealing pale flesh beneath. Lasfire has punched through the armor's weak point, but the blood that wells from torn muscle does not flow. Instead, it congeals with unnatural speed, forming a waxy seal over the wound. His lips move in what sounds like prayer. "Machine spirit of the Larriman's organ, blessed be thy clotting factors. Grant swift coagulation to preserve the Emperor's vessel. Platelet aggregation protocols, initiate. Fibrin mesh formation, commence." The words emerge in measured cadence, each syllable precise as a maintenance checklist. His breathing remains steady, regulated by organs that no longer require conscious thought. This is not devotion. This is programming made audible. The field medic crouches beside him, a chapter serf whose augmetic eye whirs as it scans vitals through armor sensors. She makes notations on a data slate with the reverence others reserve for scripture. Pulse rate, stable. Blood pressure, compensating. Larriman's organ function, optimal. Gene seed status, secure. The numbers matter more than the man. They always have. Synthetic platelets flood his bloodstream, while Thaddeus continues his litany. "Blessed coagulation cascade, preserve the progenoid glands. Sacred clotting factors, maintain gene seed integrity." Each phrase triggers biochemical responses engineered into his altered physiology. His body obeys the words like a servitor responds to command codes. The prayer protocol runs its course, sealing wounds through ritualized compliance. What we witness is not a warrior's recovery, but scheduled maintenance performed by a living machine. The Space Marine represents the Imperium's most sophisticated achievement in transforming human raw material into state-owned assets. He is biology weaponized, faith mechanized, and humanity systematically extracted until only function remains. The trinity that sustains an Astartes arrives in sequence. The chaplain's skull helm tilts as his Crozius Arcanum taps ceramite in measured rhythm, confessor and commissar, trained to detect doubt as sensors find heat. Faith becomes fastening, another bolt torqued to specification. An apothecary unfolds his narthecium, scraping resinous blood for purity assessment, while logging micro-samples under numerical strings that will outlast the war. The body serves as shrine and schedule both. Finally, a tech marine arrives with servo appendages, fussing at stress fractures, crooning to machine spirits in ferric tongues, while his augmetic eye records events to the armor's service history. This trinity maintains body, soul, and machine within doctrine. Around them, war moves in layers, squads advancing, voxnets braiding catechisms with orders. Thaddeus rises to one knee. The litany does not stop. It never stops. It is the sound of a macintuous weapon staying a weapon. A space marine is not a hero. He is a state-owned sacrament, biology, creed, and logistics bound into one instrument, accounted for down to the gram. One sealed wound reaches backward through forges and tithe counters, forward into after-action reports and requisitions. The gel hardening his blood is distilled from reagents rendered from previous failures. Waste is sin. Inefficiency, heresy. Consider the economics expressed as numbers. A cracked plate becomes an order against a forge world's quota, a shipping manifest, a purity blessing applied by serfs. Each repair, each medical intervention, each spiritual audit contributes to vast systems of creation, maintenance, and disposal that transform human children into post-human instruments of state power. He was not always a brother. Before carapace and organ and litany, he was a boy, assessed by slate and sergeant. Others ran farther, fought harder, knelt longer, and still died on tables, in hypno-chambers, or later when bones outpaced skin. The questions emerge like infection through sealed wounds. Where do the failures go? The apothecary snaps his kit closed and passes a vial to a robed assistant. It slides into a rack stamped with cog sigils of ownership. The sample will travel to apothecarian archives, tested and reconciled against expectation. Purity becomes a moving target in a long war, tracked with ledgers more precise than any merchant house manages. The Tech Marine wipes ash from a purity seal, revealing inspection runes etched beneath devotional script. Even miracles require witnessing, countersigning, storage. The habit makes survival feel like paperwork with sacramental weight. To understand what it means to be a space marine, we will not chase banners. We will follow supply lines that feed the prayer, training that sands children into tools, rites that disguise audits as ablutions. We will count with counters, bless with mechanics, watch bodies spend themselves according to institutional necessity. Thaddeus turns, weight perfect, bolt gun biting his gauntlet like an oath ring. The whisper resumes, mechanical and hollow. Somewhere a transport holds crates, blanks for new organs, seals for new vows, forms for new deaths. Somewhere else, an underhive chapel opens to the knock of a tithe party, and boys look up from their prayers. The next numbers are being written. The prayer that sealed Brother Thaddeus's wounds began decades earlier with a different knock on different doors. The tithe ships arrive by schedule, their cargo holds reconfigured, not for goods but for flesh. What follows is harvesting disguised as honor, extraction masked as benediction. On Tertius Prime, the cathedral doors open to admit the collection party. A chaplain in midnight ceramite, an administratum factor with ledger-stained sleeves, apothecarian aides wheeling sealed cases, and a tech marine whose augmetic eye records everything for quality assurance. They smell of machine oil and antiseptic. The local priest bows and steps aside. The crowd kneels because kneeling transforms loss into blessing. A parchment unrolls, names become quotas. Testing stations bloom across the courtyard like industrial flowers. Auspex pylons scan for genetic markers, while medicatents draw blood for compatibility matrices. Vox cogitators record height, reflex speeds, and neural responses to sanctioned imagery. Lines snake through incense and engine smoke. The numbers accumulate with mechanical precision. Millions in the hive, tens of thousands presenting for screening, few thousand meeting baseline parameters, few hundred selected for extraction, dozens projected to survive full transformation. He arrives barefoot, wire-thin, eyes bleached pale from factory light. The scribe asks his name because ritual demands it. He says Jalen. The scribe records candidate 7741. Numerals that will outlast any syllable his mother spoke. A rubberized stamp hisses against his wrist, leaving an inked skull. Consent is recited call and response, yeses stitched to scripture. The words do not alter the process, they sanctify it. Trials masquerade as honor, while servo skulls record biometric data. Boys race through chemical-stained corridors to measure hypoxia tolerance. They hang from corroded gantries above toxic pools, while apothecaries note who coughs blood versus who swallows it. When candidates fall, bells chime once. The crowd murmurs about the emperor's selection. Administratum scribes note subtractions. Aboard the strike cruiser, Righteous Blade, Intake processing occurs in sterile chambers, disguised as shrines. Chapter serves guide candidates through stations like pilgrims visiting reliquaries. Each stop extracts data, genetic deviation scans, psychological baseline mapping, bone density measurements for osmodular compatibility. The machinery hums with sacred oils, transforming medical examination into religious ceremony. Hypno-indoctrination crashes wait in the ship's bowels, rows of coffin pods lined with neural interface cables. Candidates slide into darkness while psycho-conditioning programs begin their work. Basic doctrine flows into developing minds, the Emperor's will, the chapter's honor, absolute obedience protocols. Sleep becomes programming. Dreams transform into compliance reflexes. Individual thought crystallizes into institutional response. Chemical baseline mapping occurs during induced comas. Intravenous lines deliver hormone cocktails, stimulants, and neural inhibitors, preparing bodies for biological modification. Some candidates convulse against restraints as foreign chemicals rewrite cellular function. Others lie still while metabolisms adjust to post-human parameters. Apothecaries monitor vital signs with the detached interest of engineers testing equipment specifications. The gene seed emerges as both gift and leash. Each organ carries genetic material harvested from previous Astartes generations, a biological chain of custody, stretching back millennia. The Mechanicus expects regular samples for purity audits. The Administratum demands compliance with established protocols. Chapters gain strength while acquiring debt, their future warriors mortgaged to institutional oversight. Candidate 7-741 wakes strapped to a surgical table. An apothecary in white ceramite leans over him, narthecium unfolded like mechanical prayer beads. On a steel tray, 19 organs wait in preservation fluid. Osmodula, Omophagea, Laraman's organ, catalepsian node. They gleam like relics under surgical lighting, beautiful and terrible. The apothecary's voice emerges through vox grills, emotionless as a servitor's recitation. These are the Emperor's gifts, candidate. Each grants capabilities beyond mortal flesh. Each demands payment in suffering and service. The osmodula will fracture your bones before rebuilding them. The Omophagea will make you hunger for enemy memories. The Laraman's organ will seal your wounds while binding you to chapter protocols. Accept these gifts and cease being human. Refuse them and serve the Emperor through other means. The boy stares at organs floating in chemical baths. He understands this is not choice, but formality. Servo skulls record biometric responses for archives. The door seals with pneumatic finality. Somewhere in the ship's records section, a scribe updates projections. 499 candidates entered processing. Models predict 40 to 50 survivors. Expected losses are recorded as acceptable offerings, feeding supply requests for anesthetics, shrouds, and salvage materials. Inside corridors, wheeled carts rattle past carrying sheet-covered shapes. Another door opens onto workshops where bones are rendered to powder for unguents and inks. Pennant servitors chant while laboring, faces smoothed of history. Nothing is wasted, not even the idea of childhood. The 19 gifts await their recipients, each carrying promises and prices yet to be calculated. The sealed door exhales pneumatic breath, and the surgical theatre brightens to antiseptic white. Candidate 7741 lies webbed to the operating table, while servo skulls drift overhead, their picked recorders documenting each procedure for quality assurance archives. The Trinity assembles around him, Apothecary Hadrian in bone-white ceramite, his narthecium unfolding like mechanical prayer beads, Chaplain Mordian, Crozius Arcanum tapping measured rhythm against the table's edge, Tecmarine Voss, whose augmetic eye records biometric baselines, while servo arms calibrate life support systems. Sacred oils mingle with antiseptic vapor until devotion smells like cleaning solvent. The surgical ladder begins with bone, because the frame must bear what follows. The osmodula slides between ribs like a grey parasite, immediately flooding his system with calcium-regulating compounds. Within hours, controlled demolition begins. His skeleton fractures by design, stress patterns blooming across long bones, while the organ's secretions rebuild them stronger, denser, capable of supporting posthuman mass. The pain transcends description. He convulses against restraints while his femur cracks audibly, then knits with mineral deposits that transform living bone into ceramite hard composite. Hadrian's liturgies accompany each phase, sanctifying medical procedure as religious ceremony. Blessed osmodula, grant strength to bear the emperor's burden. Sacred calcium, rebuild this vessel for war eternal. The words trigger biochemical responses through conditioned neural pathways, turning prayer into biological programming. Mortality margins for this stage register at 12% through bone density miscalibration. Failed candidates are wheeled away while their remains enter processing protocols. Bones ground to powder for ritual inks, calcium extracted for pharmaceutical applications, organic residue rendered into culture media. The Biscopea follows during month 3, a cluster of purple glands designed to flood muscle tissue with growth hormones. His body mass doubles within weeks, sinews stretching to accommodate strength requirements that exceed human parameters. His heart strains against the demand until auxiliary organs arrive to regulate blood pressure through mechanical precision. Tremors shake the operating table as his nervous system adapts to controlling vastly increased muscle density. The chaplain's Crozius maintains rhythm, transforming panic into compliance through repetitive cadence. Each implantation generates its own disposal stream. Rejected tissues are extracted for chemical analysis, their failure modes catalogued for future reference. Candidates who survive organ rejection but cannot achieve full integration become chapter serfs, their broken bodies assigned to maintenance duties as living reminders of transformation's cost. Others are processed as biomatter, their proteins reclaimed for nutrition supplements fed to successful aspirants. The economy of scraps operates with grim efficiency. The Larriman's organ requires the most delicate installation, positioned near the heart while monitoring systems track cellular response. This device rewrites blood chemistry, transforming platelets into rapid response clotting agents. Hadrian demonstrates its function by making a ceremonial incision across the candidate's forearm. Blood wells briefly, then congeals with unnatural speed as the organ issues chemical edicts. The wound seals with waxy efficiency, while servo skulls record time to coagulation for chapter baselines. 15% of candidates die during this stage through clotting cascade failures that turn blood to gel throughout their circulatory systems. The Omophageia installation occurs during year 4, when digestive adaptation permits brain-adjacent surgery. Servo drills bore through reinforced skull plates, while the candidate remains conscious to monitor neural responses. This organ enables memory consumption through ingested genetic material, connecting taste receptors to cognitive processing centers through synthetic neural pathways. Testing begins immediately with prepared tissue samples from various sources. Alien memories surface like oil on water. A Gretchen's terror, an orc's rage, fragments of experiences that never belonged to him. The candidate's dreams transform into foreign nightmares, requiring pharmaceutical intervention to maintain psychological stability. The black carapace represents the final covenant, installed during year 7, when all other organs achieve functional integration. This synthetic skin interface replaces natural epidermis with neural responsive tissue that bonds directly to power armor systems. Servo arms peel away layers of flesh, while the candidate observes his own skinning, nerve endings exposed like fiber optic cables. The black carapace unfolds like living metal, bonding to muscle and nerve through microscopic tendrils that penetrate cellular structure. Voss activates the first interface test, connecting the candidate to a basic power armor shell. The initial pulse creates cold, proprietorial intimacy. The armor's machine spirit whispers directly into his consciousness, reporting system status and environmental readings through pathways that bypass his organic senses. He feels the armor's weight as his own mass, its sensors as extended limbs. Ownership becomes literal. The machine spirit logs his neural signature to its memory banks, binding man and armor like ledger entries reconciled under witness. The progenoid glands arrive last, 2 organs implanted in neck and chest cavity, protected by layers of reinforced tissue. These represent the chapter's future currency, biological material more valuable than promethium or adamantium. Each gland slowly matures over decades, collecting genetic material from his other implants. Upon his death, or through surgical extraction, these organs will be harvested to produce new gene seed for future generations. Every Marine carries the next century inside him, making death an accounting loss rather than mere tragedy. Brother Matthias emerges from the surgical suites 7 years after Candidate 7741 entered. The transformation is complete, but questions multiply like infection through sealed wounds. His body now functions as a machine, requiring constant maintenance, performance audits, and quality assurance protocols. Who monitors the monitors? Who audits the auditors? The Omophageia waits dormant in his skull, its hunger for enemy memories promising dreams that belong to other minds. When the litanies fall silent and foreign recollections surface, what becomes of the boundary between self and consumed other? Somewhere in the ship's archives, Tech Marine Voss updates manufacturing reports. 499 candidates entered processing. 47 emerged as battle brothers. Expected losses were recorded as acceptable offerings, their biological components reclaimed for institutional purposes. The prayer continues, mechanical and eternal, sealing wounds that go deeper than flesh. The surgical suites discharge their transformed products, but flesh alone cannot serve the Emperor's will. Brother Matthias emerges with organs that function like clockwork, yet clockwork requires winding. The hypno-indoctrination chambers await his return, neural interface pods designed to overlay identity like armor plates. What began as medical procedure now becomes architectural, constructing mental frameworks that will bear the weight of institutional loyalty without fracture. Chaplain Mordian oversees the process with the detached attention of a quality inspector. His skull helm reflects surgical lighting, while servo skulls record compliance metrics for chapter archives. Each hypnocycle plants behavioral protocols deeper than conscious thought, response patterns to authority, trigger phrases that bypass rational consideration, emotional regulators that transform doubt into shame. The candidate's original personality becomes substrate, overlaid with programmed responses, until authenticity and conditioning merge into seamless function. The chaplain emerges as confessor and commissar both, trained to detect deviation through micro-expressions monitored by augmetic sensors. His Crozius Arcanum taps against ceramite with metronomic precision, establishing rhythm that synchronizes with conditioned heartbeat patterns. When brothers confess uncertainty during evening prayers, the tapping accelerates until cardiac stress triggers submission reflexes. Faith becomes fastening, another bolt torqued to specification. Mental discipline manifests through small rituals that reveal larger architecture. Novice Brother Cassius speaks during tactical review, his voice carrying inflections from his birth world dialect. Chaplain Mordian raises one gauntlet. Silence descends like a blade. For 7 days, Cassius maintains enforced quiet, while his battle brothers recite litanies around him. A purity seal pressed over his helm's vox grill ensures compliance, parchment glued to ceramite with sacred wax. His lips move soundlessly, forming words that cannot escape until precision replaces personality. Veteran Brother Thane demonstrates proper conditioning during equipment preparation. His fingers trace bolt pistol components, while his voice recites serial numbers like prayers. Blessed Trigger Assembly, Mark 7794, Sacred Firing Pin, blessed by Techmarine Voss on the Feast of St. Macarius. Each number carries devotional weight, transforming maintenance into worship. His mind has been trained to find sanctity in logistics, meaning in specification. The weapon becomes relic through repetitive reverence. The Oath of Moment reveals its true function during pre-combat briefings. What appears as heroic declaration operates as workflow discipline, focusing unit attention while assigning blame targets. By this oath, we shall purge the heretic stronghold. By this vow, we accept no retreat until compliance is restored. The words create psychological constraints that channel aggression toward designated objectives while expelling doubt as waste heat. Individual initiative becomes collective programming, heroism reduced to task completion metrics. Names surrender to titles through graduated replacement. Brother Matthias once answered to Jalen, then Candidate 7741, then Novice, now Battle Brother of the 4th Company, 3rd Squad. Each transition strips away civilian identity while accumulating military function. His birth name exists only in archived records, accessible to administratum audits but irrelevant to daily operation. Memory becomes inventory, tracked and managed like ammunition reserves. The Omophageia presents ongoing hazards requiring constant management. Foreign impressions bleed into dream time like oil contaminating sacred oils. Brother Matthias confesses consuming orc genetic material during recent deployment, the creature's battle rage bleeding into his sleep cycles. Chaplain Mordian prescribes penitential fasting and targeted hypno-conditioning to transform alien aggression into sanctified fury. Liturgical burning sessions under sensory deprivation starve residual impressions of meaning. The memories remain, but their significance changes, processed through institutional filters until enemy experiences serve imperial purposes. Corrective measures await those who cannot maintain mental discipline within approved parameters. Brother Darius exhibited psychological deviation, hesitation during compliance operations, unauthorized questions about civilian casualty rates, dreams that resisted doctrinal interpretation. He disappeared for intensive reconditioning, returning 3 weeks later with responses aligned to expected parameters. His eyes carry the vacant precision of servitor-grade programming. The process succeeded through methods that remain classified under chaplain oversight. Institutional audit mechanisms monitor the monitors through distributed surveillance. Battle Brothers report concerns about squad mates to chaplain oversight. Peer observation becomes devotional practice, watching for heretical thoughts like scanning for enemy movement. Trust transforms into quality assurance protocol, brotherhood into compliance verification. The chaplain's Crozius continues its rhythmic tapping during evening prayers, establishing cadence that synchronizes with conditioned responses. Individual consciousness merges into collective function, personal will subsumed by institutional directive. Yet questions persist like infection through sealed wounds. The Codex Astartes awaits, its pages containing operational procedures that will shape every motion, every decision, every moment of existence. When doctrine faces its first real test under fire, when the oath of moment binds warriors to impossible objectives, what happens to this carefully constructed mental architecture? The true cost of absolute loyalty remains to be calculated in blood and time. The mental architecture that binds Brother Matthias operates within structures vast as hive cities, sacred as cathedrals, industrial as forge complexes. The chapter reveals its true scale through corridors that echo with prayers indistinguishable from production schedules. On parchment, 1,000 warriors. In practice, a monastery factory supporting 8,000 chapter serfs, 2,000 servitors, shifting populations of aspirants, and support staff whose lives measure in maintenance cycles rather than human years. The strike cruiser Righteous Blade serves as mobile institution, its bulkheads separating departments that manage souls, flesh, and machinery with equal bureaucratic precision. The Reclusium functions as sole maintenance facility, its vaulted chambers lined with confession booths, equipped with biometric sensors that monitor psychological compliance. Chaplain Mordian's pulpit connects to cogitator arrays, measuring posture, heart rate, and vocal stress patterns during prayer services. Each brother's devotional state receives tracking like ammunition reserves, faith levels, doubt incidents, heretical thought frequencies, recorded in files disguised as spiritual evaluations. Servo skulls drift between pews, their sensors detecting deviation through micro-expressions and autonomic responses. The sacred becomes statistical, worship transformed into quality assurance protocols, where souls are counted with equal care as bolt shells. Adjacent corridors lead to the apothecarian, where flesh management occurs under surgical lighting that never dims. Apothecary Hadrian oversees gene seed storage in climate-controlled vaults, each sample catalogued with purity ratings, maturation schedules, and extraction timetables. Progenoid harvesting follows strict protocols. Neck glands at 5 years post-implantation, chest glands at 10. The biological material receives more careful accounting than imperial currency. Refrigeration units humming with sacred oils, while servo arms sort genetic samples by compatibility matrices. Death transforms into inventory management, brothers valued primarily for reproductive organs that will seed future generations. The forge occupies industrial sectors where machine propitiation occurs alongside weapons manufacturing. Techmarine Voss tends production lines that stamp bolt shells while chanting binary hymns to appease machine spirits whose cooperation determines output quotas. Sacred oils anoint each round according to liturgical schedules. Morning shift receives basic sanctification. Evening production gets full ceremonial treatment distributed by measure and rank. 3 drops of blessed lubricant for veteran reactors, 2 for novice servos, half portions for servo arms that can be persuaded to wait. Holiness operates by quota, rationed according to supply availability and tactical priority. Voss embodies institutional tensions as vassal ambassador to the Mechanicus, his augmetic implants carrying Martian blessing codes that override local authority in technical matters. Red robes peek beneath ceramite plating, marking dual allegiance that creates ongoing jurisdictional disputes. His servo skulls record conversations in encrypted formats, data streams flowing toward distant forge worlds through channels bypassing chapter oversight. When Mechanicus inspection teams arrive for gene seed audits, he translates between competing liturgies while ensuring both masters receive satisfactory compliance reports. Red secrets accumulate behind optical shutters, firmware that doubles as catechism, ritual steps encoding encryption keys. The Libraria serves as information control center, its data stacks containing operational records sanitized for institutional consumption. Chief Librarian Thalion maintains thought locks on sensitive materials while managing psychic communications across the fleet. Battle reports undergo editorial processing that transforms tactical failures into learning opportunities, casualties into acceptable losses, strategic withdrawals into tactical repositioning. Truth becomes malleable, shaped to serve institutional morale requirements through careful curation of accessible knowledge. Fleet operations reveal true scale through logistics manifests reading like religious texts. Promethium rationing schedules determine deployment capabilities, while blessed oil distribution follows hierarchical protocols. Supply chain fragility emerges through inventory reports, tracking consumption rates against resupply schedules. One lost convoy means months of rationing, while Techmarines pray to stretch ceramite reserves through salvage operations and careful maintenance. Armor plates are refaced instead of replaced, components cannibalized for rare couplings, Lars batteries reconditioned past safe cycles, while scribes draft prayers to extend capacitor life. The gene seed audit system formalizes marriage between creed and accounting through Mechanicus inspection protocols treating genetic material like industrial products requiring quality certification. In the apothecarian's inner vault, adamantine canisters rest under ceramite halos, each topped with parchment, sealed in red wax. Mechanicus inspectors arrive quarterly, their mechadendrites tasting air for contamination, while cogitators compare purity percentages against historical baselines. Tithe calendars determine extraction schedules, their dates marked in delivery deadlines rather than saints' days. Purity assessments follow standardized procedures, where 1 point deviation triggers recommendations. Increase penitential fasting, lengthen maturation cycles, cull genetic lines if drift persists. The chapter consumes worlds like forges consume ore, extracting resources through tithe obligations and recruitment quotas. Entire planetary economies exist to support single companies, their agricultural output converted to military rations, industrial capacity dedicated to armor maintenance and weapon production. Mining worlds strip crusts bare for raw materials, while forge worlds manufacture components according to sacred patterns. Accounting flows upward through bureaucratic channels, each transaction blessed and witnessed according to administratum protocols. Supply manifests read like hymnal verses, their numerical precision carrying devotional weight. 10,000 bolt shells per Terran week, 47,000 liters promethium per deployment cycle. 12 barrels sacred oil monthly for ritual applications. Chapter serfs maintain infrastructure supporting post-human warriors, their labor disguised as devotional service. Thousands of mortals clean weapons, prepare food, maintain life support systems, process waste materials in lower decks where artificial gravity fluctuates, and air recycling creates persistent chemical odors. They age and die while serving masters who barely acknowledge their existence, lifespans measured against maintenance schedules rather than human years. Servitor conversion awaits those unable to maintain productivity standards, consciousness erased while motor functions continue under cybernetic control. Brother Matthias exists within this system as component and product both, his daily existence shaped by institutional requirements extending far beyond individual consciousness. His power armor awaits in the armory, machine spirit hungry for interface communion. Purity seals dot its surface like inspection tags, their sacred script encoding maintenance schedules and performance ratings beneath devotional declarations. Techmarine Voss peels back aged parchment to reveal inspection sigils, date of service, Auspex calibration checks, lubricant exchanges, microfracture scans. The sticker of faith doubles as quality control certification. The ritual of armoring approaches when flesh and machine will merge through black carapace intimacy, ownership becoming literal through neural interface protocols. Everything requires signing, countersigning, witnessing through prayer. The accounting proves as sacred as any hymn, numbers accumulating with mechanical precision while transforming logistics into liturgy through repetitive reverence. In this monastery factory, where souls and supplies receive equal tallying, the next communion awaits, man and machine, matching parameters within acceptable tolerances, certified for deployment through devotional inspection. The monastery factory operates through individual rhythms that aggregate into institutional function. Brother Matthias emerges from catalepsian half-sleep in his coffin rack, consciousness returning through programmed sequences rather than natural awakening. His catalepsian node releases its hold after 4 hours of regulated brain activity. Efficiency replacing rest like all post-human improvements. The rack's life support systems hiss to silence as biometric sensors confirm acceptable parameters. System checks unfold behind his eyes in cool green, pulse, blood oxygen, Laraman flow, neural latency, all within tolerance. Recycled air carries metallic taste of scrubber systems working beyond capacity. Oxygen molecules filtered through blessed charcoal and sanctified iron filings. His enhanced olfactory centers detect trace signatures, promethium exhaust from engine decks, ozone from overcharged power couplings, the antiseptic sweetness of sacred oils mixed with human waste processing. These scents map the ship's health through atmospheric analysis, teaching him to read institutional mood through molecular data. Protein rations wait in his storage alcove, each meal blessed by chapter serfs and flavored with antiseptic compounds and cloves to mask recycled biomatter taste. His Omophageia processes synthetic nutrients while screening for contamination or unauthorized additives that might compromise purity protocols. The food tastes of duty and efficiency, engineered to sustain post-human metabolism without pleasure. Eating becomes maintenance function, fuel consumption tracked through metabolic monitoring systems embedded in his black carapace. Purity seals cover his armor like devotional skin, but closer examination reveals dual nature. Sacred script overlays maintenance schedules, performance metrics, task completion records. A seal bearing St. Macarius's litany conceals lubrication intervals for his left knee actuator. Another proclaiming, "The Emperor's protection," encodes ammunition expenditure rates and accuracy percentages from previous deployments. Matthias peels back aged parchment to find tech marine inspection marks, servo calibration completed, or specs functionality verified, power cell charging cycles within parameters. Devotion doubles as quality control certification. Pre-mission liturgies commence where machine spirits require propitiation before accepting human interface. His bolt pistol's weapon spirit receives 3 drops of sacred oil while he recites firing sequences disguised as prayers. Magazine weight verification follows devotional patterns, each round receiving individual blessing, while his enhanced proprioception confirms load specifications through tactile analysis. 28 rounds, standard configuration, mass distribution, optimal for rapid engagement protocols. Noosphere communication handshakes ripple across the squad as helmet systems synchronize through encrypted channels. Brother Cassius transmits equipment status updates formatted as catechisms, while tactical overlays merge into composite battle maps. The data flows beneath conscious awareness, machine spirits negotiating protocols while their human partners maintain illusion of spiritual communion. Brother Thane signals a private burst of humor so dry it barely qualifies. At least the oil is fresh today. The laugh arrives as heart rate spikes across 5 suits, then smooths when Chaplain Mordion enters. Levity becomes deviation under institutional pressure. Social economy operates through micro-interactions carrying institutional weight. Sergeant Hadrian's approving nod after Matthias completes armor diagnostics constitutes wealth in this closed system, recognition translating into favorable assignments and equipment priority. The chaplain's attention functions as performance audit, spiritual guidance, indistinguishable from quality assurance review. Status accumulates through compliance demonstration, brotherhood measured in procedural perfection. Armor misalignments register as phantom pain through black carapace interface, synthetic nerve endings reporting mechanical stress as physical discomfort. Matthias's right shoulder actuator runs hot, creating burning sensation with no organic source. Techmarine Voss approaches with servo arms extended, diagnostic tools interfacing directly with armor systems. The correction involves recalibrating servo response times, but the process carries disciplinary undertones. Poor armor maintenance reflects spiritual negligence, mechanical failure indicating moral weakness requiring technical and theological correction. Launch bay preparation transforms the ship's belly into cathedral of war, drop pods stacked like prayer wheels while targeting data streams across tactical displays. Target intelligence flows through secured channels, parchment scrolls bearing orbital reconnaissance and compliance objectives. The documents carry official seals and a final stamp appearing like sacramental mark, Oath of Moment pending. Apothecary Hadrian appears with red-stoppered vials and parchment already inked with serials, assigning numbers that will follow blood. Field extraction kits contain narthesia, with bone shears and gene scanners, cauterizers doubling as reliquaries. The ritual promises hope, while tools demand accounting. The oath approaches, words that will fix attention onto target vectors, while blinding them to peripheral concerns. Gene seed harvesting protocols wait in memory banks, surgical procedures for recovering genetic material from fallen brothers during active combat. Death transforms into resource management, casualties becoming inventory opportunities requiring immediate processing before biological degradation compromises purity standards. The oath pending carries institutional weight beyond sacred words, its power derived from the Codex Astartes that shapes every motion preceding combat deployment. Brother Matthias adjusts his bolt pistol grip according to prescribed methodology, documented across 10,000 pages of tactical doctrine. Thumb placement follows paragraph 779. Trigger discipline adheres to subsection 12 alpha. Sight alignment protocols match diagrams, blessed by tech marines and witnessed by chaplains. The Codex functions as operational manual and psychological framework, both transforming individual initiative into collective programming through devotional compliance. Squad formations follow geometric precision mandated by ancient wisdom. Third Squad maintains prescribed spacing. Sergeant Hadrian commanding from front right position, Brother Thane anchoring heavy weapons support, 3 battle brothers covering overlapping fire sectors through calculated intervals. Movement patterns choreograph like ritual dance, each step predetermined by doctrine that eliminates choice while maintaining illusion of tactical flexibility. The mathematics of violence become liturgy, angles and distances sanctified through repetitive adherence until obedience feels like gravity. Company structures expand standardization across 100 warriors, their hierarchy flowing from codex specifications rather than natural leadership emergence. Captain, lieutenant, sergeant, battle brother. Each rank carries defined responsibilities, authorized equipment, approved communication protocols. Ammunition expenditure rates follow mathematical formulas, balancing suppression requirements against resupply limitations. Even death receives standardization through gene seed extraction procedures, casualty reporting formats, memorial service liturgies. The Codex eliminates uncertainty by eliminating alternatives, reducing warfare to workflow management disguised as sacred duty. Yet the Imperium's ruinous breadth demands flexibility within rigid framework. Sanctioned exceptions flourish like safety valves, revealing doctrine's sophisticated accommodation of local necessity. Crusading zealotry compensates for lost homeworlds among fleet-based chapters whose recruitment occurs through conquest rather than planetary tithes. The Black Templars maintain eternal crusades that channel religious fervor into tactical aggression, their neophytes advancing without helmets to demonstrate faith, while sword brethren close to melee range through pure conviction. Their deviation serves institutional needs by providing shock assault specialists, while maintaining plausible adherence to core principles. Feral world adaptations channel tribal instincts through ritualized combat doctrines that transform barbarian effectiveness into post-human enhancement. Space wolves organize around pack dynamics, predating imperial contact, their great companies following hunt patterns encoded in genetic memory rather than tactical manuals. The deviation becomes asset, primitive savagery refined through institutional accommodation until cultural authenticity serves strategic objectives. Genetic flaws receive management through ritual rather than cure, transforming biological defect into tactical advantage through systematic accommodation. The Blood Angels channel the red thirst through sacramental violence, their death company unleashed during desperate engagements where controlled berserker rage serves mission parameters. Sanguinary priests monitor blood hunger through confession protocols, redirecting cannibalistic urges into enemy consumption while maintaining unit cohesion through shared genetic curse. The flaw becomes feature, weakness transformed into weapon through institutional engineering. The Ultramarines demonstrate optimal compliance through precise logistics operating like chronometer mechanisms. Their supply chains track every bolt shell through blessed inventory systems, ammunition pallets labeled according to projected attrition curves, sacred oil decanted by rank in measures correlating to maintenance cycles. An ultramarine company stamps worlds into codex footprint within hours, firing ranges cited per regulation, patrol routes templated, resupply loops closed according to approved patterns. Their virtue manifests as administrative beauty in motion, compliance elevated to sacred principle. Doctrine's true purpose emerges through these variations. Standardize enough for oversight while permitting deviation enough for survival. The Codex provides framework flexible enough to accommodate local adaptation while maintaining sufficient control to prevent institutional divergence. Chapters retain identity through deviation patterns serving imperial needs rather than personal preference, their uniqueness channeled into tactical specialization rather than ideological independence. Institutional monitoring operates through interlocking oversight layers designed to detect deviation exceeding acceptable parameters. Mechanicus gene seed purity audits measure biological drift against historical baselines, quarterly inspections comparing genetic samples to archived templates, while cogitators calculate deviation percentages. Administratum compliance reviews examine tactical performance through statistical analysis, victory rates and casualty figures revealing doctrinal effectiveness through numerical precision. Inquisitorial attention focuses on chapters whose variations suggest ideological contamination, investigations probing for heretical influence beneath tactical adaptation. The purity seal transforms from devotional symbol to inspection certificate under this oversight apparatus. Brother Matthias bears 17 seals across his armor, each marking successful completion of oversight requirements, while encoding compliance metrics invisible to casual observation. Beneath sacred script lie embedded data strips, tactical performance ratings, genetic purity percentages, doctrinal adherence scores. His samples rate 97% pure against baseline templates. His ammunition conservation exceeds chapter averages. His psychological evaluation indicates optimal compliance with minimal deviation markers. Mechanicus inspectors scan these markers during routine audits, their cogitators comparing current readings to historical patterns, while servo skulls record biometric responses. Each seal carries manufacturing dates, service intervals, inspection signatures disguised as devotional text. The faithful see prayer made manifest. The institution reads certification data flowing toward distant oversight. Agencies through encrypted channels that bypass local authority. Field deployment approaches where doctrine faces ultimate testing under fire. The oath binding his squad to tactical objectives carries weight beyond spiritual commitment, fixing attention onto target vectors while blinding them to peripheral concerns that might compromise mission effectiveness. Apothecarian field procedures await activation, gene seed harvesting protocols ready for implementation when brothers fall under enemy fire. The oversight apparatus watches through secured Vox channels, measuring performance against established parameters while preparing corrective measures for deviations exceeding tolerance thresholds. Doctrine shapes reality through institutional pressure, transforming individual warriors into components of larger mechanisms designed to serve imperial needs through standardized excellence and controlled variation. The Codex endures because it accommodates change while preventing transformation, allowing adaptation while maintaining identity through careful management of sanctioned difference. Under its guidance, Space Marines become predictable in their unpredictability, reliable through their diversity, unified by their differences. The Oath approaches, carrying 10,000 years of tactical wisdom encoded as religious obligation. When doctrine meets enemy fire, when oversight mechanisms detect variance, when the carefully balanced system of control and accommodation faces its ultimate test, the true cost of absolute loyalty will be measured in blood, time, and institutional necessity. The ledger awaits new entries, written in ceramite and flesh. The doctrine meets reality in descent, sealed inside ritual iron. Brother Matthias braces in his restraint cradle as the drop pod shudders through atmosphere. Machine spirits chanting through bulkhead vox in voices of cogs and pressure valves. Chaplain Mordian's transmission enters their skulls like needles through cloth. By this oath of moment, 3rd Squad secures the administratum complex of Tertius Hive. Restore Imperial authority within acceptable parameters. Civilian casualties, 15% maximum tolerance. The words lock into place like ammunition feeding chambers, fixing attention onto target vectors, while peripheral concerns fade to statistical noise. Tertius Hive has ceased tithe payments for 7 months, its ruling council declaring independence through bureaucratic rebellion rather than armed insurrection. The crime demands surgical correction, compliance restored through precision application of post-human violence that preserves infrastructure while eliminating resistance. Impact strikes like a verdict. Retro-thrusters fire in sequences calculated to minimize civilian disruption while maximizing tactical surprise, boring 30 meters into ferrocrete before explosive bolts shear deployment ramps into daylight, the color of old ash. 3rd Squad flows outward, formation crisp against chaos. Brother Matthias emerges into air tasting of promethium exhaust and human fear, chemical signatures processed by enhanced olfactory centers into tactical intelligence about enemy positions and civilian density. Breach charges detonate according to timed sequences, sanctified paste slapped into door seams by hands trained in catechism and chemistry. His bolt pistol's machine spirit requires immediate appeasement under stress. Thumb tap the picked sigil. 2 strokes. pause, one stroke, as Tech Marine Voss taught. The weapon purrs acknowledgement, temperamental animal soothed by rote. Room-by-room clearance becomes metered prayer. Doctrine asserts itself before sensation overwhelms, pivot by regulation, establish perimeter by paragraph. Sergeant Hadrian advances through smoke-filled corridors, while his bolter's machine spirit receives whispered propitiation. Sacred barrel, grant accuracy to your children. Blessed firing mechanism, serve the Emperor's will. Each burst follows prescribed patterns, 3-round groupings designed to neutralize resistance while minimizing structural damage to critical infrastructure. Brother Thane's heavy bolter maintains steady rate, 12 per burst, pauses measured by heat tolerances, and Chaplain Mordian's metronomic chant filtering through Vox channels. Forward, purge obstruction, preserve function. The first casualty occurs when rebel PDF forces establish defensive positions behind improvised barricades of desks and sanctified filing cabinets. Lasfire punches through Brother Cassius's chest plate, finding gaps between armor sections with desperate accuracy. He falls while maintaining weapon discipline, bolt pistol continuing controlled bursts, even as his Larriman's organ begins emergency coagulation procedures. Apothecary Severus moves through crossfire with clinical detachment, Narthecium unfolding, while combat continues around them. Field surgery commences through armor gaps, according to established protocols. Severus's servo arms work with mechanical precision, bone shears cutting through reinforced ribs to access progenoid glands before biological degradation compromises genetic material. The neck gland emerges first, pale and pulsing with stored potential. The chest gland follows, both organs sliding into preservation canisters marked with service numbers and purity ratings. Cassius remains conscious during extraction. Enhanced physiology, preventing shock while allowing observation of his own dismantling. Death transforms into resource recovery, casualty becoming inventory opportunity, processed within minutes. Enemy resistance collapses at a barricade where rebel officers attempt coordinated defense. Matthias reaches the corpse of their commander because tactical intelligence demands answers. He kneels, combat blade extracting tissue sample with ritual efficiency. The Omophageia receives genetic material like communion, bitter copper flooding his enhanced metabolism. Memory fragments surface, unbidden, key code sequences for service doors, hidden corridor locations, terror at facing post-human warriors whose movements carry inhuman precision. The intelligence proves tactically valuable, revealing bypass routes that allow squad advancement while leaving residual impressions requiring later management through confession and penitential fasting. Chaplain Mordian's Vox guidance maintains focus through devotional reinforcement, disguised as tactical coordination. The Emperor's will flows through your weapons, brothers. Sacred duty compels compliance. Acceptable losses serve greater purpose. His words trigger conditioned responses, doubt converted to determination through programmed neural pathways, while civilian casualties register as statistical updates across helmet displays. 43 confirmed civilian deaths, 11% of acceptable tolerance achieved. The numbers accumulate with mechanical precision. The administratum complex falls through systematic application of doctrine, its cogitator shrine secured after textbook violence, suppressing fire from 2 angles, breach charges whispering, hot sugar scent, final assault through breaking resistance. Survivors process through compliance stations established with practiced speed, identity chips scanned, while tithe arrears calculate in red numerals on portable slates. Victory emerges as clinical achievement, tactical objectives secured within acceptable parameters, while infrastructure damage remains minimal. During final sweep operations, Brother Matthias notices his left shoulder, purity seal tearing under combat stress, aged parchment separating from ceramite to reveal inspection notations beneath devotional script. Tech Adept cipher emerges, servo calibration dates, performance metrics, maintenance intervals, encoded as quality control data. The seal transforms from sacred symbol to certification tag, revealing institutional oversight operating beneath religious facade, while servo skulls record everything for distant archives. Aftermath accounting activates through automated systems embedded in squad equipment. Ammunition expenditure: 437 bolt rounds, within projected consumption rates. Infrastructure damage: minimal, limited to targeted breaches. Gene seed recovery: successful extraction of both progenoid glands. Purity ratings maintained through proper field procedures. Combat data flows toward oversight agencies through encrypted channels bypassing local authority. Mechanicus auditors receiving biological samples. Administratum reviewers analyzing tactical performance. Inquisitorial stations detecting deviation patterns. The ledger opens to accept new entries written in ceramite and flesh. Apothecary Severus checks preservation canisters again, pressure gauges flickering like nervous prayers, while genetic material awaits processing in shipboard facilities. Brother Matthias blinks away residual omophageia impressions, enemy memories bleeding into, consciousness like oil contaminating sacred oils. When litanies fall silent and foreign recollections surface, institutional mechanisms await to preserve sanity, while extracting intelligence from consumed flesh. Victory tastes of duty fulfilled and numbers balanced. Another compliance operation concluded with clinical efficiency. The accounting continues, mechanical and eternal, sealing wounds that penetrate deeper than armor, while transforming individual sacrifice into institutional assets through devotional bureaucracy, disguised as sacred service. Victory's aftermath flows through sterile corridors, where flesh transforms into institutional currency. Brother Matthias follows Apothecary Severus into the apothecarian's inner sanctum, their footsteps echoing toward chambers that function as genetic bank and audit office both. The progenoids extracted from Brother Cassius under fire rest in preservation canisters marked with service numbers, purity ratings, and extraction timestamps precise to the second. Death becomes inventory management, casualty transformed into biological asset requiring immediate processing, before degradation compromises decades of institutional investment. Sanctified processing protocols transform battlefield recovery into chapter currency through ritual disguised as medical procedure. Each progenoid undergoes cleansing with blessed solutions, chemical baths removing contamination, while servo arms conduct purity assessments through gene scanners that chant binary hymns. Testing follows liturgical patterns, mutation screening via sanctified cogitators, viability confirmation through devotional observation of cellular response, compatibility matrices calculated against chapter genetic baselines. The numbers accumulate with mechanical precision, determining what becomes future and what becomes waste through statistical prophecy. Cataloging occurs under ceremonial lighting, that transforms clinical procedure into religious ceremony. Servo skulls drift overhead, recording each sample's numerical designation corresponding to source warrior, extraction date, battlefield conditions, and projected maturation timeline. The data flows into archives maintained with greater care than Imperial treasury records, genetic heritage tracked through chains of custody extending across millennia. Storage follows hierarchical protocols, prime samples in blessed adamantine containers, secondary material in sanctified ceramite casings, tertiary reserves in standard preservation units marked with appropriate purity seals. Gene seed tithes depart monthly under red Mechanicus seals, the chapter's future traded for legitimacy and supply access through agreements that blur cooperation with extortion. Crates roll toward waiting shuttles, whose flight plans bypass chapter authority, their transponder keys coded for Adeptus biologists' custody. The exchange binds both parties. The chapter receives certification and supply priority, while the Mechanicus gains genetic samples for replication and distribution to successor chapters. Without these tithes, the chapter starves, its ability to replenish ranks compromised, while institutional legitimacy faces administratum scrutiny. Disputes surface where doctrine meets scarcity through apothecary techmarine tensions over purity metrics versus replacement needs. Severus argues for higher genetic standards to prevent drift, while techmarine Voss insists on meeting Mechanicus quotas to maintain supply agreements. Their current disagreement centers on Brother Cassius's progenoids, their purity rating falling to 96.7% due to battlefield stress contamination. Severus recommends extended maturation cycles to improve genetic stability. Voss counters with supply chain requirements, demanding immediate processing to meet quarterly obligations. Chaplain Mordian mediates without raising his voice, which transforms recommendation into inevitable order. 1 sample for immediate implantation, 2 sealed for extended maturation and audit review. Battlefield failures become raw materials through systematic processing that extracts institutional value from individual tragedy. Failed tissues undergo rendering into chemical reagents, proteins reclaimed for pharmaceutical applications, while cellular remnants provide culture media for future genetic work. Irreparable casualties receive comprehensive processing, disguised as funeral rites. Bone marrow becomes growth factors. Organ tissue provides research material. Blood serves institutional needs through careful processing into sanctified solutions. The economy of scraps operates with grim efficiency, transforming death into resource streams, feeding ongoing operations. Brother Matthias reviews casualty reports in the administrative section. Data slates displaying names transformed into inventory adjustments. Brother Cassius becomes service number 7741 Delta, his genetic contribution measured in progenoid yield and purity percentages, while tactical performance receives numerical rating based on ammunition expenditure and doctrinal compliance. Death reduces to accounting entry, individual sacrifice processed through bureaucratic machinery that transforms personal loss into institutional asset. The slate records equipment redistribution. Cassius's bolt pistol blessed, reassigned, awaiting new hands. Ancient Brother Sergeant Theron lies in critical care, his body shattered by plasma discharge that liquefied ceramite and flesh alike. Consciousness flickers between pain and pharmaceutical haze, while Apothecary Severus explains options with clinical detachment. death offers peace through gene seed extraction, biological legacy preserved while suffering ends. Alternatively, dreadnought entombment promises eternal service, consciousness preserved in mechanical sarcophagus between wars, while wisdom guides future generations. The choice between death and eternal service blurs distinction between mercy and conscription through institutional pressure, transforming individual agency into collective necessity. The dreadnought chassis stands ready in recessed bay, adamantine shell gleaming under surgical lighting, while life support systems hum mechanical prayers. Servo arms extract brain and spinal column through procedures blurring surgery with dismantling, consciousness preserved in chemical solutions, while his body joins processing streams. Flesh becomes reagents, bones provide calcium supplements, blood feeds culture media. Nothing wastes except natural death's possibility. Entombment creates existence compressed into tactical consultation, awareness cycling between active combat periods and suspension intervals lasting decades. Human temporal experience warps under institutional pressure. Individual lifespan extended through mechanical intervention, while natural aging ceases entirely. Brother Theron becomes Venerable Theron, consciousness preserved or imprisoned depending on ledger perspective. Time begins its distortion as extended campaigns stretch perception beyond human parameters, promising dreams that become tactical consultations while memory transforms into institutional resource. The banking of flesh continues, mechanical and eternal, sealing accounts measuring brotherhood in biological samples and devotional compliance. The banking of flesh concludes with seals and signatures, but time's relentless accounting continues through mechanisms that transform human experience into post-human function. Brother Matthias stands in the observation deck as the righteous blade turns toward void black infinity, its Geller field generators humming prayers to machine spirits that will navigate unreality's tides. Warp transit stretches weeks into months into uncertainty, ship chronometers becoming theological suggestions, while causality distorts beyond mortal comprehension. His years accumulate through deployment cycles and equipment refits rather than seasons, temporal meaning dissolved into operational rhythm, where campaign tertius concludes and campaign quartus begins through violence rather than celestial movement. Human worlds he saved during early service age and die while he fights distant fronts, their populations cycling through generations that never know his designation. Tertius Hive rebuilds its administratum complex with grateful efficiency, children born in compliance stations growing old, while their savior remains unchanged aboard distant battlefields. His enhanced physiology arrests aging through biological modification, decades passing like tactical intervals, while mortal time accelerates beyond his perception. The disconnect grows absolute through institutional design. He preserves civilizations that perish through natural entropy, while enduring through artificial permanence. The catalepsian node teaches sleep skipping like accounting, eliminates zeros, 4 hours of regulated brain activity replacing 8 hours of natural rest, through pharmaceutical precision. Half his consciousness maintains vigilance, while the other half processes tactical data. Fatigue transformed from biological necessity into solvable problem. When orders require extended suspension, the Susan membrane drops over him like armory storage, shutting down organs and slowing blood, until he becomes equipment awaiting activation. He wakes 19 standard years later, according to Administratum dockets, his first thought a maintenance checklist. Dust has settled, voices have changed, he has not. Memory stratifies into operational categories through conditioning that transforms personal history into tactical database. Brothers Lost become after-action lessons linked to equipment failures and engagement angles rather than grief requiring management. Vows kept reduced to performance metrics scored against codex patterns, sacred oaths processed into compliance percentages, tracked through quarterly reviews. Enemies consumed through homophagia protocols become intelligence assets, foreign memories catalogued according to strategic value, while personal significance fades to statistical noise. He files them by flavor and utility, the sour panic of rebel adjutants revealing door codes, the iron taste of heretics mapping sublevels. Homophagia residues bleed into sanctioned nightmares, requiring ongoing management through confession protocols designed to preserve sanity while extracting operational intelligence. Brother Matthias dreams of consumed enemies with increasing frequency, alien battle rage, and mortal terror bleeding into sleep cycles like oil contaminating sacred machinery. Chaplain Mordian prescribes penitential fasting combined with targeted hypno-conditioning, starving foreign impressions of meaning while redirecting their content toward approved tactical applications. Food tastes of ashes and cloves until dreams lose emotional edge while preserving data. The nightmares persist, but their interpretation changes. Enemy experiences transformed into sanctioned intelligence rather than psychological contamination. Human connections attenuate through cognitive distance that institutional conditioning reinforces. Mortal populations inspire awe mixed with fear, their brief lifespans creating emotional barriers that doctrinal emphasis on post-human superiority systematically widens. Chapter serfs age and die during single campaigns while he remains constant, their mortality highlighting his artificial permanence. When children on newly compliant worlds look at him with terror and reverence mixed, he feels nothing except confirmation of function. Distance becomes policy through devotional discipline. His birth name fades through systematic replacement, with battle designations carrying operational significance rather than personal history. Jalen becomes Candidate 7741, then Novice Matthias, then Brother Matthias of 3rd Squad, 4th Company. Each transition strips away civilian identity while accumulating military function, names surrendered to titles reflecting institutional role rather than individual character. The process accelerates during extended campaigns, where tactical call signs replace formal designations entirely. Chaplain Mordian approves this erasure as spiritual progress during confession sessions, where memory management receives theological justification. Forgetting human origins demonstrates successful transformation from mortal weakness to post-human strength, individual identity sacrificed for collective purpose through devotional discipline. Gene seed inheritance carries temporal weight across generations, genetic material accumulating mutations through extended exposure to warp transit and battlefield stress. Each implanted organ represents centuries of accumulated genetic drift, biological heritage modified through environmental pressure exceeding natural evolutionary timescales. The progenoids maturing in his chest require constant monitoring through purity assessments, measuring deviation against historical baselines spanning millennia. Oversight mechanisms monitor these post-human warriors through distributed surveillance designed to detect deviation patterns across extended temporal scales. Yet questions multiply like genetic drift. Who monitors the monitors when oversight spans centuries? What happens when watchers themselves succumb to temporal displacement, their human perspectives warped by extended exposure to post-human subjects requiring evaluation? The ledger continues its accounting, mechanical and eternal, measuring brotherhood through biological samples, while time transforms from human experience into institutional resource managed through devotional bureaucracy, disguised as sacred service. The temporal displacement that transforms Brother Matthias into institutional asset conceals deeper corruption threading through his enhanced biology. Gene seed inheritance carries more than genetic potential across centuries, accumulating drift-like sediment in sacred oils through processes that transform blessing into biological time bomb. Each progenoid extraction, each implantation cycle, each generation of Astartes adds microscopic errors to genetic templates designed for perfection. Mutation pressure increases with every replication, warp exposure and battlefield radiation, creating deviation that no amount of prayer can arrest. The system that creates post-human saviors contains mechanisms of its own corruption, producing monsters as inevitable byproduct of its own sacred processes. Apothecary Severus functions as genetic custodian, through duties extending far beyond battlefield medicine into hereditary surveillance, requiring constant vigilance against deviancy markers, emerging like infection through blessed flesh. His laboratory contains gene scanners, blessed by tech marines, and witnessed by chaplains, cogitators analyzing cellular samples for mutation signatures that accumulate across generations like accounting errors, compounding through institutional ledgers. Each progenoid extraction includes comprehensive genetic mapping, deviation percentages calculated against baseline templates stored in archives spanning millennia. The numbers accumulate with mechanical precision. 0.7% drift in osmodular calcium regulation, 0.3% variance in Larraman coagulation cascade timing, 0.9% deviation in black carapace neural interface protocols. Extreme purity measures operate through protocols that transform minor variations into existential threats requiring immediate institutional intervention. Entire bloodlines face termination for genetic drift exceeding tolerance thresholds. Brothers eliminated not for heresy, but for biological deviation, beyond acceptable parameters. Chapter archives contain sealed files documenting systematic purges conducted with liturgical efficiency. Third Company's 7th Squad, eliminated after gene seed purity, fell to 94% through accumulated mutations. Their progenoids were rendered into chemical reagents, while their armor received new occupants bearing cleaner genetic heritage, death transformed into quality control through devotional accounting. The Lamentors exemplify cursed inheritance through genetic material that transforms probability into malevolent force, affecting battlefield performance through cellular abnormalities. Their gene seed carries mutations affecting neurochemical balance in catalepsian nodes and homophagia organs, creating warriors whose enhanced reflexes misfire during critical moments, while equipment failures follow statistical patterns suggesting genetic causation rather than random misfortune. Mechanicus audits confirm biological defects that manifest as supernatural ill luck requiring constant penitential observance to maintain chapter legitimacy, while brothers die through weapon malfunctions that trace to genetic source code. Blood angels demonstrate institutional accommodation of biological horror through genetic flaws transformed into tactical assets via systematic management. The red thirst emerges from accumulated mutations in omophagia organs, creating hunger for blood that evolves from dietary requirement into psychological compulsion, driving warriors toward cannibalistic behavior. Their death company channels genetic curse into controlled berserker rage, brothers succumbing to ancestral memories of their primarch's death while serving as expendable shock assault specialists. Sanguinary priests monitor blood hunger through confession protocols that redirect cannibalistic urges into enemy consumption while maintaining unit cohesion through shared genetic curse managed as tactical advantage. Space wolves carry Canis helix instability, threatening transformation into literal beasts, their gene seed containing lupine genetic markers that accumulate through successive generations until warriors regress beyond posthuman parameters. The mutation manifests as enhanced sensory capability and pack-hunting instincts serving tactical purposes, but degradation beyond tolerance thresholds produces Wulfen requiring elimination or exile to preserve chapter integrity. Their genetic balance requires careful breeding programs disguised as recruitment protocols, selecting candidates whose genetic material accommodates lupine modifications without complete devolution into feral state. The Mechanicus gene seed audit system emerges as quality control apparatus, treating genetic material like industrial products requiring certification through procedures blending religious ceremony with laboratory analysis. Quarterly inspections arrive aboard red-hulled vessels whose tech adepts conduct comprehensive purity assessments, measuring deviation percentages against historical baselines, while cogitators calculate mutation rates across extended temporal scales. Chapters must prove genetic stability through statistical evidence or face graduated responses. Minor drift receives corrective protocols. Moderate deviation demands supply restrictions. Severe corruption results in excommunication or systematic elimination. Brother Matthias undergoes routine screening in sterile chambers, where tissue samples reveal secrets invisible to conscious awareness through genetic analysis conducted like confession using medical instruments. Gene scanners chant binary hymns while analyzing DNA sequences for mutation markers, their verdicts determining continued service or potential elimination through institutional necessity disguised as medical requirement. His results arrive as numerical abstractions, 97.4% genetic purity, within acceptable parameters for continued deployment while carrying accumulated drift requiring monitoring. The horror transcends individual cases through systematic recognition that corruption emerges from institutional processes themselves rather than external contamination. Gene seed degradation occurs through the same mechanisms designed to create perfection. Warp exposure during transit, radiation from exotic weapons, chemical contamination from battlefield environments, temporal distortion affecting cellular structure during extended campaigns. The Imperium's greatest achievement contains seeds of its own destruction, producing corruption through sacred processes, while quality control becomes theological necessity enforced through institutional violence, disguised as medical intervention. When guardians fall to genetic compulsion rather than ideological choice, when the system's own biological processes create enemies from within, institutional responses must account for their own failures while preventing systemic collapse. The nightmare of renegade Astartes approaches, promising reckonings that will test institutional loyalty against biological inevitability through accounting written in blood and betrayal. The genetic corruption threading through sacred biology reveals only half the institutional horror confronting architects who designed systems capable of spectacular inversion. Gene seed degradation creates monsters through biological processes, but psychological fractures produce something worse: space marines who turn against the Imperium through conscious choice rather than genetic compulsion. Brother Matthias reviews classified files in the Librarius archives. Data slates containing records of chapters excommunicate, their designations struck from Imperial rolls through damnatio memoriae protocols, designed to erase institutional failures from historical memory. The accounting proves as meticulous as any ledger, tracking betrayal through bureaucratic precision that transforms tragedy into statistical analysis. Apostasy emerges through psychological architecture designed to eliminate individual agency, while concentrating devotion into channels vulnerable to redirection. Isolation breeds doubt when chapters operate beyond imperial oversight for extended periods, their moral frameworks eroding under pressures that doctrine cannot accommodate through standard responses. The same hypno-indoctrination that creates unwavering loyalty becomes liability when external stress exceeds design tolerances. Doctrinal rigidity breaks under impossible pressures, creating psychological fractures that chaos corruption exploits through manufactured gaps in institutional conditioning. The Omophageia complicates matters further when foreign memories bleed into dreams carrying enemy certainty that tastes like truth. The Red Corsairs exemplify systematic failure through gradual corruption that began with sanctioned deviation and culminated in open rebellion against imperial authority. Their chapter master Luft-Huron received authorization for aggressive expansion beyond Codex parameters, territorial conquest justified through strategic necessity, while pride accumulated like genetic drift through successive victories. Bureaucratic opposition from administratum oversight triggered defensive responses that escalated into armed resistance, loyalty inverted into rebellion through psychological mechanisms designed to create absolute devotion. The same conditioning that produced ultimate loyalty created conditions for ultimate betrayal when institutional pressure exceeded system tolerance thresholds. The fallen Dark Angels demonstrate ongoing crisis requiring constant concealment from imperial oversight, their Gene Father's heresy creating institutional vulnerability that poisons brotherhood from within. Half their original legion turned traitor during the Horus heresy. Brothers fighting brothers while loyalty and betrayal became indistinguishable through shared genetic heritage. Their inner circle operates through compartmentalized knowledge distribution, truth parceled out by rank, while ordinary battle brothers remain ignorant of their primarch's shame. Each deployment becomes potential exposure of chapter-destroying secrets, institutional integrity preserved through systematic deception that transforms every mission into existential risk. Imperial response protocols activate through procedures, blending administrative efficiency with theological necessity, transforming institutional failure into systematic erasure. Damnatio Memoriae begins with record modification, chapter designations removed from historical documents, while their achievements receive attribution to loyal successors or unnamed participants. Extermination campaigns follow liturgical patterns, loyal chapters receiving coordinates and objectives without narrative context. The Minotaurs specialize in this fratricidal function, their gene seed selected for psychological traits enabling efficient execution of fellow Astartes while maintaining doctrinal compliance through institutional compartmentalization. A chilling case study, documented in sealed administratum files, involved a chapter whose gene father was discovered to have embraced heresy during the distant past. The chapter, having dedicated millennia to his memory, found their entire doctrinal foundation undermined by revelations requiring immediate response. Their solution was systematic, ritualized self-destruction rather than face excommunication or corruption. Each company engaged in final battles against overwhelming odds, ensuring their own annihilation to preserve imperial integrity while preventing their tainted gene seed from propagating. The chapter master transmitted a final compliance declaration in perfect form. Deviation identified. Corrective action initiated. No distress beacon followed. Their heraldry became pattern available for reassignment. Loyal chapters forced to destroy corrupted brethren face psychological trauma, requiring ongoing management through confession protocols designed to preserve sanity while extracting operational intelligence from fratricidal experience. Brothers report increased latency in trigger pull when target silhouettes match their own specifications. Chaplains prescribe hypno-reinforcement packages emphasizing obedience to edict over kinship to pattern, shifting loyalty from biological heritage to institutional signature. The psychological impact emerges through recognition that their indoctrination system contains mechanisms of its own subversion, absolute conditioning creating vulnerability to spectacular inversion through pressure-exceeding design parameters. The twist crystallizes through institutional analysis, revealing that the crucible creating ultimate loyalty also creates conditions for ultimate betrayal through psychological architecture that eliminates resilience while maximizing compliance. An Astartes cannot half-defy, because his conditioning prevents partial responses. When corrupted authority redirects his absolute obedience, the same mechanisms that once purged heresy now target imperial institutions with equal fervor. The oath of moment fixes attention. If compromised leadership designates the Imperium as obstacle to the Emperor's will, devotional programming inverts completely while maintaining structural integrity. Institutional memory processes these failures through mechanisms designed to extract operational intelligence while preventing systemic learning that might threaten existing power structures. Each excommunication generates classified reports analyzing causation factors while implementing corrective measures addressing symptoms rather than underlying vulnerabilities. The Codex gains addenda-tightening authorization protocols. The Mechanicus installs remote kill firmware in armor subsystems. The Inquisition expands monitoring across centuries. Lessons learned integrate as if they were always known. Scar tissue forming around recurring wounds, while fundamental architecture remains unchanged. Brother Matthias files reports recording only numbers, but questions accumulate like genetic drift through institutional processes designed to create perfection while producing corruption as inevitable byproduct. The long view approaches, promising examination of what eternal service truly means when eternity includes systematic betrayal through design features that transform loyalty into liability across temporal scales exceeding human comprehension. The reports documenting betrayal and corruption close with seals and counter-seals, but the institution resumes its rhythm as if apostasy were another variable already accounted for in endless equations. Brother Matthias, now Sergeant Matthias, after decades measured in deployments rather than seasons, stands in the training chambers where his own transformation began. The chevrons on his armor mark not achievement, but endurance, survival through campaigns that blur into statistical abstractions. His role has crystallized through accumulated experience into something both more and less than heroism. Not victory, which the Imperium cannot afford as definition, but endurance measured in worlds bought time to fail, later than they otherwise would. The scale of Imperial enemies defies comprehension through human mathematics, revealing the true horror of infinite conflict applied against finite resources. Orc empires spawn through spore propagation, exceeding any extermination rate achievable through conventional warfare, their reproductive cycles generating millions for every 1,000 eliminated. Tyrannid hive fleets consume entire systems faster than Imperial forces can respond. Biomass conversion, creating exponential growth that transforms defeat into multiplication. Chaos corruption spreads through psychological vectors, immune to physical elimination, heretical thoughts propagating through populations at rates exceeding purge capacity. The equation balances only through constant expenditure of irreplaceable assets, Space Marines deployed as expensive bandages against arterial wounds that never heal. Young bodies move through firing stances in the training halls, taller each month as organs, take root like grafted creeds. Matthias adjusts a wrist here, a shoulder there, corrective touches precise as tech marine calibrations, while reciting doctrine that has forgotten how to doubt. Trigger discipline per subsection 12 alpha, he instructs, and 3 helmets incline with mechanical precision. Names do not echo these halls, because numbers answer faster. Identity surrendered to function through systematic erasure that transforms boys into components of larger mechanisms. Human residue surfaces rarely, usually through sensory triggers that bypass conditioning protocols. Today it emerges through cloves on the rim of a ration tin, sharper than standard issue, cut with some kitchen worker's memory of festivals that do not exist for posthumans. For a heartbeat, his enhanced olfactory centers process street stall aromas from Tertius, fried dough under failing lumens, the phantom syllable, "Yah," rising uselessly from suppressed memories. He burns it away with the litany of focus, cold extinguishing conducted without heat, while Chaplain Mordian observes from shadows, skull helm inclining in benediction for successful erasure. Progress, recorded and witnessed. Between deployments, he consults Venerable Theron in chambers deep within the ship's spine, consciousness preserved in adamantine sarcophagus that speaks with voice like old oil pouring slowly. Conserve aggression, the ancient warrior counsels through vox grills that transform breath into mechanical whisper. Anticipate failure as weather. Teach them what pain is for. Theron describes dreamless decades as pauses in speech rather than time endured, existence compressed into tactical consultation, while natural aging ceases entirely. Awake, the vigil. Asleep, the vigil. Do not promise them victory. Promise them watchfulness. Astartes' existence testifies to desperation rather than triumph, their posthuman capabilities representing institutional acknowledgement that normal human forces cannot sustain adequate resistance against threats requiring superhuman intervention. Each chapter functions as stopgap measure. 1,000 warrior formations deployed against enemies, numbering in billions, while achieving tactical success through localized application of overwhelming force that changes nothing strategically. Victory becomes redefined through mathematical necessity, successful delay rather than decisive resolution, triumph measured in years purchased rather than enemies eliminated, heroism calculated through duration of resistance rather than conclusive peace. The institution consumes its finest to maintain itself through reproductive cycles that transform human potential into post-human function while extracting maximum utility from biological investment. Matthias observes Candidate 9847 undergoing procedures identical to his own transformation, terror mixed with devotion, gradually eroding under hypno-indoctrination cycles that overlay institutional identity like armor plates. Each recruit represents decades of training, surgical modification, and psychological conditioning, requiring resources equivalent to equipping entire guard regiments, their deployment following economic logic disguised as tactical doctrine. His own progenoids approach maturation benchmarks according to apothecarian schedules that read like harvest calendars rather than medical records. The genetic material developing within his enhanced physiology carries accumulated mutations from decades of warp exposure and battlefield radiation, biological heritage modified through environmental pressures exceeding natural evolutionary timescales. When death claims him, these organs will seed future generations through systematic processing that transforms individual sacrifice into institutional assets, the cycle perpetuating through necessity rather than choice. Space Marines endure because they have been systematically stripped of alternatives through conditioning that eliminates individual agency while maintaining illusion of heroic purpose. Their psychological architecture prevents partial responses, absolute loyalty, creating vulnerability to spectacular inversion when pressure exceeds design parameters. They serve as living testament to imperial determination to survive regardless of cost, post-human capabilities purchased through systematic consumption of human potential across generations spanning millennia. The eternal vigil continues through mechanisms that transform desperation into devotion, mathematical impossibility into sacred duty, individual erasure into institutional permanence. Victory becomes irrelevant when viewed through temporal scales exceeding human comprehension. Only continuation matters, the grinding maintenance of resistance against infinite opposition through finite resources, managed with devotional precision. Each battle won merely delays inevitable defeat while creating space for recruitment cycles to process new candidates into weapons, the ledger balancing through careful accounting of blood, time, and systematic necessity. The final accounting approaches, promising examination of what remains when transformation completes its work through decades of service, conditioning, and temporal displacement that reduce individual identity to statistical abstraction requiring replacement through institutional processing. The ledger prepares to close on another entry, measuring brotherhood through biological samples and devotional compliance, while institutional memory processes individual erasure through mechanisms designed to preserve function rather than person, duty rather than dream. The vigil continues through recruitment ceremonies that mirror themselves across decades like prayers echoing in cathedral vaults, each iteration identical, yet consuming new flesh for the institutional machinery. Sergeant Matthias lies motionless in the apothecarian's inner sanctum, his progenoids approaching final harvest after decades measured in deployments rather than seasons. The genetic material developing within his enhanced physiology carries accumulated mutations from warp exposure and battlefield radiation, biological heritage modified through environmental pressures, while Apothecary Severus prepares extraction protocols with clinical detachment. His neck gland rates 96.8% purity, acceptable for immediate processing. His chest gland requires minimal additional maturation. The numbers accumulate with mechanical precision, determining what becomes future and what becomes waste through institutional accounting disguised as medical procedure. Elsewhere, cathedral doors open to admit the collection party, whose scent carries machine oil and antiseptic, whose ledgers transform names into quotas through systematic processing disguised as benediction. Aspirant 9847 arrives barefoot and wire-thin, eyes bleached pale from factory light, staring at testing stations that bloom across courtyard flagstones like mechanical flowers. The scribe asks his name because ritual demands theater. The boy says something that sounds like hope. The scribe records candidate 9847, numerals that will outlast any syllable his mother spoke. A rubberized stamp hisses against his wrist, leaving an inked skull. Consent is recited call and response, yeses stitched to scripture, while servo skulls record biometric data with mechanical precision that transforms individual assessment into statistical prophecy. Severus's narthecium unfolds like mechanical prayer beads, while preservation canisters await their contents, each container bearing labels encoding service history, genetic compatibility, ratings, and projected viability timelines, extending beyond individual lifespans into institutional permanence. The incision follows liturgical patterns, ceramite and sternum opening with practiced indifference, while marine and machine spiral into single act. Each progenoid slides into red-stoppered vials earning lines in the ledger. Source Matthias, Fourth Company. Purity acceptable. Chain of custody initiated. Chaplain Mordian signs the faith column. Techmarine Voss signs the technical column. Seals clicking like red wax cooling to blood temperature. In chambers disguised as shrines, Aspirant 9847 wakes strapped to surgical table, where 19 organs wait in preservation, fluid under surgical lighting. Osmodula, Biscopea, Omophagea, Laraman's organ, black carapace, each gleaming like relics while carrying genetic material harvested from previous generations through systematic processing. The apothecary's voice emerges through vox grills, emotionless as servitor recitation. These are the Emperor's gifts, candidate. Each grants capabilities beyond mortal flesh. Each demands payment in suffering and service. Accept these gifts and cease being human. The door seals with pneumatic finality, while servo skulls record biometric responses for archives that will outlast individual existence, the Institutional permanence emerges through recognition that individual humanity has been sacrificed to maintain eternal military capability through processes consuming their finest while perpetuating resistance against infinite opposition. The system operates through necessity disguised as choice, tragedy transformed into devotion through hypno-indoctrination cycles that overlay institutional identity like armor plates. Imperial doctrine provides theological framework for mathematical impossibility, sacred duty emerging from desperate calculation that post-human intervention can delay inevitable defeat through localized application of overwhelming force. Matthias tastes cloves and something sweeter that does not belong on warships, fried dough under failing lumens, phantom syllables rising uselessly from suppressed memories. The litany of focus burns it away with cold precision, while Chaplain Mordian observes from shadows, Skullhelm inclining in benediction for successful erasure. Progress, recorded and witnessed. His enhanced olfactory centers process the antiseptic sweetness of sacred oils mixed with preservation chemicals, atmospheric analysis teaching him to read institutional mood through molecular data, even as consciousness fades through systematic blood loss. The final irony crystallizes through institutional analysis, revealing that Space Marines defend humanity precisely because they are no longer human enough to question the cost through psychological architecture, eliminating individual agency, while maintaining illusion of heroic purpose. Their conditioning prevents partial responses, absolute loyalty creating systems that consume human potential while producing post-human function through reproductive cycles spanning millennia. They serve because they have been systematically stripped of alternatives, devotion manufactured through surgical modification and mental conditioning, transforming boys into components of larger mechanisms designed to preserve civilization through its own systematic consumption. Statistical projections update automatically across data slates displaying mathematical prophecies that transform individual tragedy into acceptable losses measured against strategic necessity. 499 candidates enter processing. 40 to 50 survivors are projected through models accounting for surgical failure, psychological breakdown, and genetic incompatibility. Expected losses are recorded as acceptable offerings, their biological components reclaimed for institutional purposes, while sacrifice feeds ongoing operations through careful recycling of organic materials into useful products. The prayer begins again, mechanical and eternal, sealing wounds that penetrate deeper than flesh, while transforming logistics into liturgy through repetitive reverence. Machine spirit of the Laraman's organ, blessed be thy clotting factors. Grant swift coagulation to preserve the Emperor's vessel. The words emerge in measured cadence, each syllable precise as maintenance checklist, while triggering biochemical responses through conditioned neural pathways. Programming made audible, devotion reduced to biological function through institutional design that transforms worship into quality assurance protocol. To be a Space Marine is to be remembered as function rather than person, individual identity, surrendered to institutional permanence through systematic erasure that preserves duty while consuming dream. Their names disappear beneath numerical designations, their achievements attributed to chapter rather than individual, their deaths processed as inventory adjustments, requiring replacement through ongoing recruitment cycles. The creed endures through mathematical necessity, sacred principles emerging from desperate calculation, that superhuman intervention can maintain resistance against overwhelming opposition through finite resources managed with devotional precision. The ledger balances through careful accounting of blood, time, and systematic necessity, while institutional memory processes individual erasure through mechanisms designed to preserve function rather than person. Aspirant 9847 stares at organs floating in chemical baths, understanding this is not choice but formality, while the machinery of transformation begins its work. Somewhere, a scribe updates projections. The vigil continues, grinding maintenance of resistance against infinite opposition, while victory becomes irrelevant compared to continuation itself. The prayer continues, mechanical and eternal, sealing accounts, measuring brotherhood in biological samples, while transforming individual sacrifice into institutional assets through devotional bureaucracy that disguises consumption as sacred service. The accounting proves as sacred as any hymn.